Hi everyone and welcome. We're down here in my wormery and we're getting ready to feed the worm bins. See how the compost in them is coming along. I just really liked the way things looked here as I was preparing to turn some lights on. The natural light coming in through the window seemed so nice and warm. I thought I'd try to open the video with just some of this natural lighting coming in here. Couple little extra things going on here. I'm going to be adding a lot of extra bedding in the form of some coffee filters today. And everything else is pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. You always see me feeding with used coffee grounds and grit, in my case eggshell, which these bins that we're feeding today did not actually get a week ago when they were last fed. Pretty much any sort of kitchen scrap is fair game for the worms. And freezing it this way, well, you know what stuff like this all starts to get like when it starts to thaw out. It's all mushy and it's perfect. Alright, so let's get some of these bins out here. We're not actually feeding bins today, we're feeding bags, the VermiBags. So the nightcrawlers are in the two VermiBags over there, African nightcrawlers, European nightcrawlers. So let's get them over here, turn some lights on, and get to work. So here in the African Nightcrawler VermiBag Mini, you can see, alright, looks pretty nice. Nicely populated feeding zone with another coffee filter, serving as feeding zone indicator. So they're really making a meal out of their feeding zone indicator. The coffee filter might just be best to throw that into the bottom as bedding material. These guys seem pretty content around the last feeding zone. 7 days since this bin was last reloaded with food. I did skim through the video briefly just to refresh my memory on what was and wasn't added, and it did appear to me like, you know, unless I missed it, I think I did skip adding grit last time. Alright, so a couple of the staple items that we keep finding in these bins is 2 pieces of corn cob, so there's probably another one down here somewhere. The second one seems much lighter, so they must be working on this one a little bit better than this one. This one feels a little bit more intact. So they're getting devoured at different rates. Last time there was extra bedding added in the form of shredded paper. Seeing bits and pieces of that here and there, which is good. But other than that, I'm not really able to identify anything from the previous feedings other than those 2 corn cobs. So it would appear that they were able to break down everything that they got a week ago, which is good. Alright, let's get the food over here. Besides just the food itself, I'm going to include this coffee filter with each handful. I've got 2 more coffee filters to incorporate that way. There's a Vermicomposting apple pie, all skins and cores, and its own little pie crust, coffee filter pie crust. Okay, looking good. One more generous handful of other similar kitchen scraps for them, which we will top off some eggshell, pulverized eggshell, this grit, and used coffee grounds to cover everything up. Oops, almost forgot about these old hunks of corn. Toss them right in here on top, as well as some of these larger chunks. Just get things covered up here nicely. So I believe somewhere in here, I think we've got that old feeding zone indicator, that coffee filter. We'll just upgrade to a nice new one here. Show that we fed right there. The material got sprayed down yesterday. I came down here with the spray bottle. Both VermiBags got a nice spray down. So that's why the material looks pretty nice the way it is. If it hadn't been for that, I think it would be starting to get kind of dry. And it's also nice to see that the paper that was covering things is still pretty damp, at least on the bottom. On the top you can see it is much drier, visibly drier. So I'll come in here and add more water at some point, but right now I think we're in good shape. So, alright, let's wrap up and we'll get the VermiBag tote on the table. Alright, it's on to the VermiBag tote. This one's got the African nightcrawlers in it. Last week when we were in here feeding, we actually started seeing some signs of cocoons and some reproduction action, which was really cool to see. This bag, just like the other bag, got a nice little squirt down too. So the moisture levels in here are just right, but if it hadn't been for the little squirt down, things would be a bit dry in here. Definitely like the way these little guys like to hang out right on the surface. This bin, or this bag, also doesn't seem to have a feeding zone indicator. If at some point I were to want to start feeding on the edge, then maybe I would want to be able to show that, or know that that's the case to remind me where I fed last. Although I've always been feeding down the middle so far. But at some point I might want to start marking the feeding zones. Same story here as the other one. 2 ears of corn. One of the ones we saw in the last bin seemed like it was progressing pretty nicely, but these both feel still pretty in the early stages. What do we have down here? Remnants of the previous feeding. I'm trying to remember if this might have been a block of rice. Looks like it could have been. You can see other various bits and pieces of stuff. Nothing that I can really make sense of. This must have been the key lime. The key lime was placed in here whole. So we'll leave that as a discernible chunk of something for a while. See how it progresses. Banana stem, I assume. Nice and damp down here where the food was. Looks like there's still a fair amount of remaining food from the last time. And bedding. Let's get the bedding back down underneath where we're going to add the fresh food. Just want to make a nice big hole because what remains in the tray is a fair amount, so I want to make sure I got room for it all. Alright, try to maximize my little coffee filter full of food. Package number 1. This includes rice, that hunk of rice, just like we did in the first bin. This piece has a whole apple. It probably would help if it was all chunked up or in small pieces, but it's interesting to see how a whole something progresses in the worm bin, so I don't mind adding big chunks of food. A lot of people suggest that I grind the food or blend it or try to at least small chop it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on what mood I'm in. Okay, so this is the last of the food. Somehow we made it all fit. Let's not forget these existing chunks of food. Add them back into the feeding zone. And I've got one more coffee filter. I'll use this to wipe out the food tray. Make sure I get all the loose little scraps that are still in there. Well, I got the most of it. Not bad. More bedding. Well, that was the whole idea of this feeding with these extra coffee filters, was to enhance the amount of bedding that I've got. Last week I added shredded paper. This week I figured I would add coffee filters. They just keep piling up, but I've got so many of them already. I just need to finally get down to using them somehow. Out here on the edges, where it gets a little bit drier, a little bit more distant from where the food is typically added, it's not as wet, not as damp, but luckily for the moisture that I've been adding with the spray bottle, things seem to be pretty decent out here on this side. Here too, things seem okay. Love to see how the material is really transforming into castings, or at least very castings rich combination of food and bedding and everything else. So definitely coming along nicely in here. 200 and how many days now? We noted its 200th day not long ago, but I think we're already a few weeks past that. 221. Population's that old at this point. But all these little guys, or at least the mature ones that you see, all started out as tiny, tiny little tiny worm eggs, worm cocoons that all hatched out right here in my wormery. Alright, sorry, I'm pushing compost aside just to add one last thing, which I forgot, which I sometimes forget, my coffee grounds. So let's dump the remaining food that I had set aside for today's meal time in here. Otherwise I'll just end up having to keep storing it, and that's always the biggest pain in the neck, is keeping this stuff around somewhere. It's usually my motivation for feeding, because I gotta make room, gotta get rid of it. Alright, so glad I didn't forget the coffee. So easy to forget. Alright, things look nice in here. I'll be adding more water as time goes on, because it's still just the beginning of winter, and winter is always a dry time. So along with the dry air and a well ventilated bag like this, the need to ensure that the moisture levels are correct is always a persistent consideration. So alright, let's get this thing all cleaned up, packed away, but I won't keep you around for all that. That's it for today, everyone. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your company. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And also consider signing on to become a subscriber of the channel, and maybe even hitting that bell, get notifications when there's new videos online. Alright, everyone. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.